Well, hello there. Oh, hold on. Quick pee. Well, I just got back from a little walk there. Quite often in the morning I'll go for a walk before lunch. I can go any number of ways, but I quite like to go through the Clyde Tunnel, through Govan, and then back along by the River Clyde and the Science Centre. It's a nice little walk. It's a couple of miles there. Keeps you fit and builds up an appetite for a good lunch. I needed a pee in Govan. And this video is all about the lack of public toilets these days. The video's not just about Govan, but in Govan I thought I need a pee. And I went into this, it was some sort of community place. I saw the word community, there's a few folks sitting at tables. I thought it was a cafe. I went inside and I thought, oh, I didn't see any coffee or plates or cups or anything. Folk were just sat at tables. Some of them might have been knitting or something, I don't know. So I thought, this isn't a cafe. Thankfully they did allow me to use the toilet, for which I was very grateful. In Govan I used to use the toilet in the Pearce Institute, but the last time I was there that I noticed up at the door saying toilets just for customers or something like that, you know. Passers-by aren't allowed to pee in here. And I think the bottom line is that there is not a public toilet in Govan. And if you just stop and think about that, that's quite astonishing, really. You know, people might think, well, I'll see if I can find, there must be a library, I can maybe use a toilet in there. It turns out this morning, the library in the park, the library was getting renovated or something. It was shut. I kind of walked in an open door and realised it was a building site. And people may also think, I could pop into a pub, use the toilet, but if it's before the pubs are open. You know, just a couple of weeks ago I was filming for the video about the Mullen Diner burn. And there used to be a public toilet up beside the cathedral. Like most public toilets, it's now shut. It's not even converted into a cafe or anything, it's just shut. I thought, I need a toilet here, I need a pee. So I thought, I'll go to the nearby hospital, there's better be a toilet in there I can use. And I went into the toilet and I had a camera and a tripod, and of course, when folks see a camera and a tripod, it starts to kind of invoke certain emotions in them. And if that camera and a tripod's in a toilet, it invokes even more emotions. Folk thinking, is this guy going to film me in here? And there was a member of staff, and he kind of I was getting in a cubicle, I had a camera set up outside the cubicle, and he looked at it and he said, he clearly wasn't initially sure what to say, but then he said, are you alright? And that's always a confusing one, you know. Whenever anyone asks me if I'm alright, I'm thinking to myself, has something happened and I'm lying in the ground, but I haven't yet twigged that that's where I am. And it kind of got himself together. He said, have you got permission? And I'm thinking, what, do we need permission to pee now? And the camera was pointing out the window. The lens cap was on. I'm clearly not filming. And I said to him, I've got the camera on a tripod, I'm not filming. So I carry on, you know. But anyway, just let's get this video up and running, and I hope you enjoy what follows. Hello there. You know, it was Billy Connolly that said something along the lines of, when you get over 50, you should never pass up an opportunity to have a pee. The small issue these days is that there are precious few opportunities to actually have a pee, because there's just a lot of closed public toilets. Like this one right here, Greendyke Street in the east end of Glasgow. There are other examples in the city, for example in Minerva Street towards the west end, and also at Charing Cross. I mean, peeing is quite important. If you don't pee, you'll burst. That's why folks say, I'm bursting for a pee. Yes, burst. And this was brought quite starkly home to me during the coronavirus pandemic, during lockdown. And, excuse me, I mean, it kind of changed throughout the kind of 2-year period, but at one stage you were advised not to go any further than 5 miles from your house. 5-mile radius of your house. But in actual fact, in reality, it wasn't the distance we were allowed to go that restricted my movement. It was the size of my bladder. Because all the places that I would normally go for a pee, none of which were public toilets, sort of visitor attractions or various things around about. When you get to a certain age, you've got a mental map of the toilets you can use close at hand. But they were all closed during lockdown, and I must have walked too far or something. I thought, I'm not going to make it home. I'm going to wet myself. And I actually peed just behind me, under the railway arches. The railway arches that aren't actually arches, the rectangular bits under the railway, behind the bush, you know. On another occasion, while I'm sprinting up the stairwell of the multi-storey flat that I stay in, because I thought it might be quicker than a lift, a little drop of urine sneaked out. And it was just one little drop, but at the time I thought, oh my God, I've wet myself. How embarrassing can this possibly get? So, you know, public toilets are very, very important. And in the past, there was another group in society that was restricted by the size of their bladder. Incidentally, I'm fully anticipating a blue plaque here at some stage, maybe saying something along the lines of, Ed peed here during the great pandemic.
Have you never wondered why there are very few women in old street photos? The truth is that only a few women had a bladder capacity big enough to allow them to venture far from their house. There were simply no public toilets for a woman back in the old days. This photo dates to 1868 and shows a street urinal in Glasgow's Trongate. It was a facility designed for use by just men, of which there are many in the photo. This later photo dates to the 1930s, about 60 years after the last photo was taken. It shows a public toilet at Gardezloo Cross in Glasgow, and once again it was just for men. For men were rough and tough and drank beer and needed to pee a lot. Women, if brave enough to venture into town, deliberately restricted their fluid intake and simply had to hold it in till they got home. But even toilet facilities at home weren't exactly flush with luxury and mod cons. Street urinals for men was a step up In a world where chucking your body's waste out of a window onto folks' heads was par for the course, and where peeing against the wheels of a horse-drawn cart was permitted. For men, that is. For women, the term urinary leash applied, a term used to describe the restriction in distance travelled due to a lack of toilet facilities. Toilet facilities in houses were not even considered necessary in the Victorian period, at least where working classes were concerned, and tenements were thrown up with no indoor toilet facilities at all. It was only in later years, with some legislation in 1892, that toilets were added to the rear of many tenements, with one toilet on each landing for use by 3 or 4 families, as seen in this image of the rear of Crookston Street, now Carnoustie Street, in Kingston, in the 1920s. Such basic facilities existed up until the 1960s. I remember visits to Aunt Sissy and Uncle Alfie in White Inch, where the outside toilet in the close was a disgusting puddle-strewn cupboard where luxury meant someone had cut the newspaper used to wipe back sides into neat little rectangles. A step up from newspaper was the crinkly toilet paper found in some public toilet cubicles. For customers who had spent a proverbial penny to get in, you were treated to the luxury of wiping your bottom with a government-owned commodity. Every crinkly sheet of that loo roll had the words government property printed on it. Hard to believe, I know, but true. The notion that the government once owned and controlled toilet paper is quite strange, but I imagine it was to reduce theft. You'd be a bit embarrassed if visitors to your house saw those printed words. Toilets for travellers are no easier these days. Organisations like ScotRail and Network Rail seem at times to actively discourage peeing, and finding a working or open toilet in trains or in stations can often feel like an uphill struggle. I was in Linlithgow recently, and I had to go down and up a flight of stairs to get a member of staff to open the toilet. It was locked, not because they had forgotten to open it. It was locked because it was nice and clean and they didn't want anyone to spoil it. Later that same day, the toilet on the train back to Glasgow was out of order. The toilet on the train back to Partick was out of order. And when I asked staff at Partick railway station about a toilet, I was directed to Morrison's supermarket. At some stations, you still have to ask staff for the toilet key and prove you are a traveller with a ticket and not some poor soul who's just passing and needs a pee. Why are we penalising the bulk of the population because of potential misuse by a very small minority? There's something badly wrong with the attitude at ScotRail and Network Rail in connection with toilet facilities. We can see many mid-19th century street urinals in old maps. Here's the Argyll Street end of St Enoch Square in Glasgow with 2 urinals. I wonder if they were actually shaped like that, or if it was just a standard printed design to denote a urinal. Here's another one in Craigensstock Street, which no longer exists, but used to sit close to Templeton's carpet factory in the Carlton area of Glasgow, just east of where Green Street is now. In later maps, these facilities were renamed with either the letter L or LAV, both being short for lavatory, as we can see again in Craigensstock Street. On this occasion, we have a photo of this very urinal. We're looking up Craigensstock Street around 1900, with the cast iron urinal on the left, just as shown on the map, and a street full of interesting bits and bobs, from lovely old adverts to a pub on each corner, and a young woman bravely venturing out. This map of 1934 shows the public lavatory in Clyde Street in Glasgow, which still exists, but is closed. This map shows the toilets in Minerva Street, again closed. Greendyke Street, closed. Charing Cross, closed. Kelvingrove Park, closed. Dumbarton Road, opposite what is now the police station, now no more. A 1934 map of Glasgow shows upwards of 14 public toilets, all of which are either shut or completely gone. The only public street toilet in Glasgow city centre is a rather intimidating modern contraption that looks largely shut or out of order, even for disabled people.
Oh, the memories. Guppies and paddle boats. This is Victoria Park in Glasgow. I used to wander around here during the pandemic, but not too far. I'm not sure if you can see it, but way behind me are public toilets. This park has public toilets. I mean, they weren't open during the pandemic, but they're open now. But, you know, compared to toilets in the past, it's a pretty poor affair. But I actually used them during the pandemic. And by the way, I don't want to get too close in case there's a have you got permission scenario developing. But yeah, I used them. No, it couldn't have been during the pandemic. They were closed during the major lockdown, but I think as things eased, they must have been open. Anyway, I used them once. And just, as I say, it's a porta cabin that's very poorly decked out to be a toilet. And the cubicles are so small that it's nigh impossible to actually get into the cubicle and close the door. Because when you make your way into one of the cubicles, you find that you can't close the door because you're in the way. It's like, how am I supposed to close the door here? I'm in the way. You know, it's very ridiculous. When you compare what you've got there with the likes of the Victorian public toilets at Rossie Pier that are still in use today, I mean, you wonder where have we gone wrong that we could build stuff like that back then. I've got this bit of nonsense way behind me. And I think in Victorian times, economically, Scotland and the rest of the UK was doing well. Right now, the UK economy is in sort of free fall to zero. There's no money for anything. And that sort of manifests itself in any number of areas of society, including public toilets. I'm Eddie Burns. Don't get caught short, whatever that means. I'll see you again.